Hi, my name is Thomas Ravenel. I'm running for the United States Senate. I want to talk to you today a little bit about my vision for our military and our defense against terrorists and any other threats that may arise, and juxtapose it to my opponent Lindsey Graham's. But let me first take you back in history. The founder of our nation by General Washington, George Washington, he was a heroic general turned president. He basically made the same farewell address to the nation as did Dwight David Eisenhower, another general turned president. It was basically the same address. Beware the military-industrial complex and the influence, the unwarranted influence it has on those in the corridors of power. They were talking about the Lindsey Grahams of the world. They were talking about the military playing politics and buying off politicians and growing an establishment and creating basically a thinly veiled jobs program. I mean, you take a look at what's going on now with the Joint Strike Fighter. $400 billion boondoggle, waste of money, total waste of money. But it's worse than that. It's not even like a public works project whereby we build bridges or roads that create benefits for constituents. All it does is creates benefits to the companies and to their employees. And politicians are bought off by this because they want votes and they want campaign contributions. We need a military that provides for the common defense of America, our vital interests, and our way of life. Not a military that's trying to democratize the Middle East or try to reorder societies around the globe, you know, in our image at the point of a gun, or trying to defend wealthy countries like Europe. That makes us less safe. As these countries step back, and why would they spend money on their defense when they know America has it covered? They can't defend themselves or their region if we're always trying to be the sheriff, the world's 911. This does not make for a safer country. And the terrorist threat, counterterrorism, I absolutely support funding for that. But, you know, sort of like Rahm Emanuel, never let a crisis go to waste. Well, they were talking about Bush. And they were talking about people like Lindsey Graham. They've taken this crisis, 9/11, and they basically have used it as an excuse to spend money on all these projects and weapons programs we do not need. It's not as if we were going to arm to fight the Soviet Union or Nazi Germany, but, you know, if we were to double our military, it would have been irrelevant. I mean, we've got 300 ships and submarines, 8,000 military aircraft, 1.5 million men and women in uniform, 30,000 tanks. It did not deter those angry 19 young men who flew those airliners into the buildings in 9/11. But what did protect and prevent a future 9/11 style attack and a future hijacking was what the airlines did. Didn't cost the taxpayers a penny. They just started locking up the cockpit door to the pilot's cabin. So what the terrorists do, and I've done a lot of studying about this, what they attempt to do is to induce the victim state, particularly a democracy that has little experience with terrorism. They want them to overreact. And we don't need to learn this through trial and error. There are many, many other examples where other countries have gone wrong and they've overreacted and ended up terrorizing themselves and suspending their constitutional rights. And they've had, you know, police states followed by military coups and tens of thousands of people dying. Well, what we have done, what Al-Qaeda has done, is basically they've relied on the Lindsey Grahams of the world who go around fear-mongering and scaremongering and making outrageous statements like, well, if we don't invade this country, you know, this country's going to nuke Charleston, or we're going to bring democracy to Iraq even if we have to kill every single last one of them. So they depend on people like Lindsey Graham. He is basically aiding and abetting the terrorists. I mean, Al-Qaeda has catalyzed 2 conventional wars that have cost $4 to $6 trillion. You know, thousands of people have died, 1,600 amputees. You know, a third of the people that are fighting over there in those wars have come back with post-traumatic stress syndrome. And when they come home, they have to deal with the VA, which he's supposed to be providing oversight to. And then he votes for these liberal judges who are going to give us Obamacare. Now, if you've been reading the headlines of the VA crisis and scandal, that's a sad preview of what we're all going to be looking forward to. Because he voted basically to fund it, and he voted for the judges who were the swing vote for Obamacare. So I have real problems with him on foreign policy, with respect to counterterrorism, with respect to his philosophy on the size, the scope, and the tax bite of Washington. He's constantly voting to raise the debt ceiling. He voted for against sequestration, not because they didn't cut enough, but because they cut too much. This is unsustainable. It's irresponsible. It's reckless. He's been up there too long. And quite frankly, he's not advancing freedom, if I might understate the point a bit. And I want him to debate the other candidates. Now, he'll probably try to avoid the debates, as he did during the primary, but yet he's got enough time to meet with President Obama 19 times in the Oval Office. He's on Meet the Press every week. You know, he has time to fly around the world, act like he's, as the Democrat, Brad Hedda said, trying to act like the junior Secretary of State, basically wanting to act like a big shot. And he doesn't have time to come and talk about the issues that concern the people of South Carolina, about where our tax dollars are being wasted. They're acting far too easily with our tax dollars, and it's time we need a change. Not only that, but Washington is just too big. We've gotten away from the Constitution. You know, it's so big that the rulemaking body, the legislative branch, has to delegate a lot of its responsibilities. It basically abdicates its responsibilities and delegates it to the administrative agencies, which are under the executive branch. And that's a violation of the checks and balances between the branches. Our founding fathers were students of history. They studied thousands of years of history, and people struggled for liberty, and they were very hostile to concentrations of coercive power. That's why they divided power horizontally and vertically. Horizontally, they wanted an executive branch, a judiciary branch, and a legislative branch, and checks and balances between the three. And also they divided government vertically with federalism. But what's going on now is everything's being run from the federal government. You've got all these grant and aid programs whereby, you know, take Medicaid, grant and aid program, you know, every dollar we spend, we'll get $2 to $3 from the federal government. There's 16 million bureaucrats whose sole job it is to ensure compliance with all the red tape, this tangled web of red tape coming out of Washington. It's not about trying to improve outcomes or improve quality. In fact, some states develop elaborate schemes so as to waste money so they can get more money. They're rewarded by more money from the federal government. You spend $1, you get $2 or $3. So there's a lot of waste, inefficiency. We need to reclaim federalism. You know, welfare reform was so successful because it was a grant aid program that was just block granted. That engaged the laboratories of democracy. One state could get it right, the other 49 could learn from that state and replicate the rightness of that policy. Conversely, if they got it wrong, it didn't infect the other 49 states. Moreover, you could always vote with your feet. You know, if you didn't like a policy in your state, you could vote with your feet. And you also had the right to be in a state where the people can make laws that reflect their own values. I mean, what we do in South Carolina may be quite different than what they do in California. This one-size-fits-all system coming out of Washington is wrong. We know, not through intuition, but through experience from the Soviet Union, the collapse of the Soviet Union, through the collapse of socialism, through the collapse of Greek-style redistributionism. We don't need to learn this again. We already know what works and what does not work. So the government needs to be smaller, and we can have better outcomes too, as the states can make the proper trade-offs with their money. And it's not about trying to game the system to get more federal tax dollars. Too many politicians, like Lindsey Graham, go to Washington. They think it's their job to bring back pork to South Carolina and not fix what's wrong with Washington. That's a Faustian bargain. You know, you get $1 of pork, that means we ostensibly agree to pay for pork in 49 other states. The problem has to be corrected. We have to represent the country, because as the country goes, so goes the states. If we're not fixing the country and the structural problems with our government, our states are going to go south, as we saw after the financial crisis in 2008. And there's a lot of things I want to talk to the voters about, and I'm going to be doing this on a weekly basis. But today I just want to talk about terrorism, the goal of the terrorists. Lindsey Graham wants to take away our freedoms. And Eisenhower said, because Lindsey Graham believes that Security and freedom are mutually exclusive. That's absurd. Eisenhower said that security is mutually dependent on national solvency. Let me say that again because it's important. Our national security is mutually dependent on our national solvency. And we can't have a strong, vibrant economy unless we're free. Free to think, free to create, free to create this wonderful world we have. It's right there in the Declaration of Independence. Life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. Well, originally, Thomas Jefferson was talking about life, liberty, and property. But he went to a higher level, pursuit of happiness. If we are free to do what we want to do, not what the state would dictate us to do, we are then free to innovate, to be creative, to be inventive, to create various items and goods and services that elevate our standard of living. And if we are not free, we cannot be secure. But some in Washington who pay lip service and do the bidding of the military-industrial complex, they want to convince the people that you can't have your freedoms. Because if you have your freedoms, then you're going to lose your security. I would argue the opposite. Without your freedoms, we will not have solvency. We will not have an increased quality of life. We will not be able to develop the weapons that will defend us against the terrorists or whomever may want to attack us in the future. Our country is very safe. It's the envy of the world. We are bound north and south by friendly, docile allies. We are flanked on the east and west by massive oceans. We have 5,000 nuclear warheads, 1,000 of which are deployed. They can be deployed by land, sea, or air. We've got silos. We've got B-2 bombers and B-52 bombers, which could drop these nuclear weapons anywhere on any country foolish enough to attack this country. In fact, there has not been a foreign enemy on our soil since 1815. So I would say that our military is overstretched, and based on the missions that we've given our military, we need more money because we're doing too many things. We're trying to be the world's 9/11, and we cannot afford it. And I would say that we need to have a strategy based on restraint, not trying to go and fix everyone else's problem. You know, just because somebody sneezes on the other side of the planet, it doesn't mean that we're going to get pneumonia. We need to stop misdiagnosing everyone else's problem. And for example, if somebody's got a head cold, it doesn't mean it's cancer. You know, and every time we involve ourselves, we have to think of the unintended consequences. You know, look what's happened in Syria and our involvement there, in Libya, in Egypt. Every time we involve ourselves, there's a counterproductive result. We are putting our men and women and our sons and daughters unnecessarily in harm's way and achieving counterproductive results. And I put the blame squarely at the feet of politicians like Lindsey Graham. And we absolutely need a change, and we need to have a real debate on these issues because he's been allowed to skate in the last two elections. His strategy as a politician and that of his consultants is to clear the field. You know, back in 2002, his consultants taught Mark Sanford and Charlie Condon into running for governor. He got the nomination without a fight. 2008, I went down. I was going to take him on. He skated the nomination. You know, he had minimal opposition, re-elected. This year, we're going to give him some tough competition, and we're going to force him to debate us on the issues. And if he runs, if he's scared to debate, we're going to point that out as well. Because the people of South Carolina, and the people of this nation, quite frankly, need to have this debate, and they need to hear a counterbalance to what he's saying on Meet the Press every Sunday. They're not getting that. I think that's pretty good. All right. Give me 5 minutes and then we'll do some more. I mean, 99% of this is bad, but we just want one